Hey, Espen, I don't need to tell you, I've been busy. You fully understand what life is like. There's just so many things to fill your time, fill your days, and I've been intending to get back to you about that question you asked. Although I did answer it initially when we had our face chat. I wanted to be more extensive in the response to it, and I've been wanting to get into my office and do it there with some notes that I made and stuff, and I just haven't been able to get a lot of access into my study area. I'm gonna do what I can here right now, and I've looked at it in a lot of different ways because, like I said before, it's probably one of the more important kinds of questions that you're going to ask yourself and that you will be asked by other people, and to understand it, the reasoning behind a statement like what Tim Keller made. I'm going to read the way that you wrote the question out to me when you sent it to me on WhatsApp, and then I'll go from there. And I'm flying by the seat of my pants, so there could be, it could be choppy, it could be. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to trust God to give me wisdom as I speak to you. What you said in your WhatsApp text to me was, in the podcast, Tim Keller said that not every good person will go to heaven because only Jesus is the way. For me, that doesn't sound just, because some people are good people and they know less about Christianity, but some of them might still have a good heart. So I was wondering, why do people who are good not always go to heaven? I'm going to answer it again on video, then you'll have it for reference sake, and if you like, I can print out a transcript of the video. Why is it that not everybody that is a good person goes to heaven? The way that I want to address that question right now is I want to use reason. I want to use logic. And this is the reason I've thought about different ways of answering it, because it's multifaceted. Like, I can answer it in many different ways, and I want to, and I probably will if I can get time. Like, time is definitely an issue. But we have to realize that, and I'm sure I talked to you about this before, but that we live in a Western culture that thinks in a Western way. We process things using what I'm going to call Socratic thinking. We have been influenced by Greek philosophers, in particular Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And they don't always agree on everything. But there is this one thing, there is this structure of logic. The cornerstone, the basis, the foundation of this Western way of thinking is a law of logic called the law of non-contradiction. In that law, it is what it sounds like. I know that English is second language for you, so I would explain it anyway, but I'm going to explain it a little bit. The law of non-contradiction says that something can't be true and not true at the same time. It's either true or it's not. Now, that assumes that there is such a thing as truth, that there is such a thing as objective truth. And even those people who say that there is no such thing as objective truth, they live their lives according to this law of logic. It is foundational in human reasoning. In even people that say they don't adhere to Western ways of thinking and Western logic use this law of non-contradiction. It's a law. I mean, it's virtually impossible to get away from it. I'm going to try and elaborate a little bit on that, but also I want to present sort of the broadest other way of thinking, other logical way of thinking. And to me, and to Socrates, and to many other people, they will recognize the error of this way of thinking. But over half the world employs this method of thinking, and that is a dialectic way of thinking. Thinking that something can be and or it can be two things at once. It can be true and not true. So I believe that there are some things that you could say are true and not true, and that is relativity. That's where that relative thinking comes in. But when it comes to objective truth, you can't have this dialectic way of thinking. It just doesn't work, because something is either true or it's not true. So, for example, we all live knowing certain truths. For instance, when you want to cross the road, when you come to a stoplight, a crosswalk, and you want to cross to the other side of the road, you definitely look both ways. You know for a fact that it's either you or the bus, right? So, I mean, you're not going to step out in front of the bus. There's an objective truth there, and that is that the bus is going to overpower you. The bus is going to win, right? That's objective thinking. That's a very basic sort of way of explaining objective thinking. Whereas the dialectic way of thinking would assume that you could step in front of the bus and the bus is not going to hit you, or it doesn't work. It doesn't work in a case like that, which is objectively true in a physical way. Well, that law applies in more than just the physical. It applies to reason. So when you're reasoning and when you're thinking, it applies. Let's see, why am I talking about this? I mean, this is going to be quick. I'm not going to go extremely deep. Maybe I should sit down, write out exactly what I'm thinking, and give you a sermon or a teaching session. This is sort of like a briefing. You've come to believe that the things that Jesus said about himself are true, right? So, and when I say true, that means it's real. It is truth that ascribes to reality. It is truth that is supported by reality. That he is the Son of God. He is the Creator. He is who he said he was, God. And he had a mission. He came to earth with a purpose, with intent. And so the things that he said while he was here, while he walked this planet, the things that are written in the Bible, including the Old Testament, that attest to him and to who he is, they all say that he is God. He is the Son of God, and he is the extreme authority. So he comes and he walks on this planet, and he tells people that he is God. Some people will debate that, and that's a whole nother thing, or an extension of this discussion. But in that he is God and the things that he said are true, one of the things he said was that he is the way. No man comes to the Father. So no man enters a relationship with the Creator God except through him. He said that. I didn't say that. So whether you think that you are good or not is irrelevant in that sense. But there's an extension from that, the whole a good person thing. Another thing that Jesus did as he walked this planet, and I know I talked about this at some point with you, whether you remember it or not. I'm pretty sure you do. You're pretty sharp. You remember stuff. You have a very sharp intellect. He walked this earth, and in John, I think it's in John 1, the Gospel of John, in verse 1 or 2, there's a passage that says he did not make himself known, like he didn't actually reveal his deeper inner self to men, because he knew what was in the heart of men. And that's another thing that we've talked about, and that's another question, evil. He knew that the hearts of men and women were intrinsically evil. Like, that we could overcome that to some degree is apparent. There are people that do good in the world, and there are people that are seen as good in the world. So we have this perception that people are good, and it's true that people are good and do good things. But what is not true is that they are all good. There is none good. There is no one that is good. I mean, that's what sin points out. Sin is missing. Remember, I said sin is like an arrow shooting at a target. And sin is missing the bullseye. Anytime you miss the bullseye, that's sin. That's not living up to the holiness of God. And our God is holy. I mean, and this whole concept of how the Hebrews spoke, how they used their language was, if they said something was holy, it was holy. I mean, and that's a big word. But if they said it was holy, holy, then that was holy to the second power. But if they said something was holy, 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 it was holy to the third power. So we get into these big numbers because it can go on and on. Holy to infinity. He is, everything is measured against him. Everything is measured against God's truth and righteousness and who he is. So if we're measuring against God, there is none good. There is no good, right? And so in that God is holy, 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 there is, if there is any slight bit of darkness in a person's life, in their heart, if they have lied once in their life, if they have taken something that didn't belong to them once in their life, if they have even thought lustful thoughts once in their life, things where they coveted a woman that wasn't their wife or a man that wasn't their husband, that makes them not good. So I'm not saying they're like black, evil, dark heart, murderous adulterers. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that in comparison, as we put ourselves up against the white background of a holy, I mean, in the bright white, the brightest white background of a holy God, our little sin stands out like a spot of spaghetti on your white t-shirt. It's not something that can be acceptable, right? You're not going to wear your white dress shirt or your white anything out into public in a setting where you have to be clean and look presentable, or even want to be clean and look presentable. If you've got a spaghetti stain or a raspberry jam stain or a coffee stain on your shirt, right? That's not, you have sinned. You have spoiled your shirt. Your shirt or your dress or your coat or your hat or whatever it is now spoiled. It must be cleaned. To say that not all people that are good people are going to go to heaven is to say that they must be accepted, or they must accept the forgiveness and the cleansing that comes only from Jesus Christ, the way. He's the way, he's the truth, he is life, and he is light. He is these things. He is all of these things that the world looks for. In saying that, and in recognizing that Jesus came 2,000 years ago, and that man had been living on the earth, according to biblical estimates, at least 3,000 years before that, maybe more. And if you even consider the accepted view of the Western world that, you know, we evolved and that we've been on this, life has been on the planet for billions of years. That's a whole nother discussion. I don't want to get into that. Whatever. How can all people be measured against Christ when in time he came so late in the existence of the world? So that's where our understanding of God becomes really important. If we believe God is holy, if we believe that the laws are actually representative of his character, of who he is, so when it says do not steal, it is because God does not take what is not his. That's why we measure against God. God does not take what is not his. When he says do not lie, it is because God does not speak untruth. God cannot speak untruth. God cannot take what is not his. When we consider it on those grounds, then our life is measured against those things. For people that had lived previous, the Bible's not explicit in this, but as you read through the Old Testament, you come to realize that we're judged according to what we know. And there is judgment. There must be judgment. We talked about that. In order for justice, which is part of God's character and part of what we long for, being created in his image, we desire to be as he is. Justice is part of who he is. And we live in this world which has no justice. And that was one of the things that you said in your question. It doesn't seem just. So in realizing that God is justice and realizing that God is holy, then, I mean, and that's what we're measuring against, then you to question the justice is to question who God is. Let's take it back and realize that our whole perception of justice is actually based out of him, out of his character. Our whole desire for justice is based out of him, out of his character. And if anybody could be just, it would be God, who was eternal, who is eternal, who lives outside of time, who knows the beginning from the end, who knows even how you were conceived, who knows even what took place in the conception of Espens, right? And who knows the DNA of Espens and all the history of his family that's within him, and that builds and adds to his character, or anybody's character. I'm using you because I'm talking to you. God's justice for you actually extends in time past, for eternity past. And God's justice for you extends into time forward, future, for eternity forward, future, right? So that's God's justice. That's something we can't even comprehend. We can't, honestly, we can't wrap our heads around that. That's time, that whole time issue again. I'm going to give you a story, and there's many, many, many stories, many stories. The story of Joseph I told you briefly when we were talking on the phone. Read that story. I think I sent you. Read from Noah, read all of Genesis, but read the story from Noah right to the end of Genesis, and you'll get a glimpse of God and who he is and how he works, right? So that's a good one. But I want to go more into the future of the line of Abraham, who the promise was given to. Before there was a Jewish nation, this promise was given to Abraham that he would be the father of many nations and that the whole world would rejoice in his seed, right? So that's Christ comes from his seed. So Christ also is called the son of David. So David was the second king of Israel. I'm going to have a drink. A little bit of Joel's Koala Kombucha. Just a Koala Kombucha. I keep it in my flask here. David became king. He was chosen by God after the first king, which was basically chosen by the people. God appointed him. God picked him, and the people approved of him. And then he fell off. That was Saul. He became so arrogant and full of himself, which is, again, reveals the heart of man. And he wouldn't repent. He wouldn't come before God and say, I did wrong, until he was coerced. You can read all that story. That's in 1st and 2nd Samuel. That's the story of Saul and David. It's a lot of reading, but it's really interesting. So when David was a shepherd, he was the youngest of 10. I can't remember. I think it was 10 sons. I can't remember. 5 sons, 6 sons, but however many it was. He was the youngest. He was a shepherd. It was his job to take care of the sheep. And in a desert environment, that meant that he would be gone for days at a time. That same part, it's in the story of Joseph. I talked about that with Joseph too, because Joseph was held back. I told you that. So David was also a musician. He was a creative person. He wrote, I would guess, at least a third of the Psalms. He worshipped God with music and poetry, and he loved beauty, and he loved nature. He learned about God by sleeping under the stars, taking care of the sheep, and fighting off lions and bears and defending the flock. And his character was developed as he was a young man, your age. He wasn't an old man. He was young, and he was forged in the fiery furnace of life experience in the wilderness, fighting wild animals and defending the flock of his family. So when God raised him up, he came as the leader of of the Jewish people, the Israeli nation, the Hebrews. We call them Israel because of Jacob. It's another story in Genesis before, you know, if you read from Noah to the end, you'll read about Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. As he ascended to the throne and Saul was dethroned, he was killed, him and his sons. So there was no one to ascend to the throne from Saul's family. David was made king by the people because he was the warrior victorious. He was the smartest, strongest, wisest, most compassionate leader that was available, and God raised him up for that. Later on in Romans, I think it's Romans, there's talk about David being a man after God's own heart. It might have been in Acts, because it was in Acts, because I was reading about the early church and how it got found. So David was a man after God's own heart. So I think as you read about David in 1st and 2nd Samuel, you come to realize that didn't mean that he wasn't just like any other man. He had evil thoughts. He did evil things. The most vile thing that he did after he became king was he one day was on his roof. And in Israel and in the Middle East, that's like, you spend time on your roof. You have a view of the land around you, and that's where you can sun yourself and bathe, and supposedly be out of view, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, the king's house is higher than other people's houses. He sits up on the mountain, and he looks down from his roof and sees a beautiful woman on the roof of another house, bathing. And he lusts after her. Her name is Bathsheba, David and Bathsheba. And he sends for her. Well, first he asks who she is, and he finds out who she is. She's a married woman. But her husband is in the military. Her husband works for David. David the king serves in the military. And they're at that time, his military force is at war with another city. City kingdoms are the way it operated pretty much then. There would be kings, an affiliation of kings that ruled a land, and over those kings there would be one king, sort of like the king of the kings, king of kings, which is one of the titles of Jesus. In that the man was away, he had Bathsheba brought to his place, and he laid with her. He had sex with her. He had sexual relations with her. And some days later, weeks, whatever, Bathsheba realizes that she's pregnant. This is David, a man after God's own heart. He's done this thing. That's horrible. So he sends to his general, the head of the leader of his army, and requests that her husband be sent back from the front line. Says, tell him to give me an update on what's happening on the front line in the war. So the man comes back, and he comes into David, and he gives him an accounting of what's happening in the battle, and how they're succeeding or not succeeding. They were succeeding. And so David says, thank you very much. Okay, go home, go lay with your wife. Go have a meal at your house and lay with your wife and sleep in your own bed. And he doesn't do it out of integrity, out of his own sort of moral code. He stays in the courtyard of David. He sleeps with the other soldiers that are there, because his opinion is that he will not go and enjoy the luxuries of his house and his wife, lay with his wife, while his comrades, his fellow Israelites, are battling for their life on the front lines. So David finds out the next day that he never went home. So he's like, oh, well, my plan didn't work. So he calls him up again that day, that afternoon, and invites him for a meal and gets him drunk and sends him out again. He says, go lay with your wife. you know, go. You have to do this to protect me. You have to go and do this thing. He doesn't say that, but that's in his head. That's what he's doing, right? He doesn't go again. He sleeps at the gate. He stays in the compound, David's compound. And David realizes that his scheme isn't working. So to add sin to sin, he writes a note to Joab, his general, and says, I can't remember what Bathsheba's husband is right now, what his name is, but he says to Joab, I want you to send Bathsheba's husband up to the front line of battle, and then I want everybody to pull back and leave him alone. Like, just give him enough room so he's the guy that's in the front. And Joab is like, if I do that, he'll die. And David's like, he sends a message back, and David's like, if he gets killed, then I'll take care of it, basically. So he does it. They pull back. He gets killed, gets shot by an arrow. And the messenger comes from Joab, and he's like, okay, we'll tell Joab not to worry, that he was a good man. This was a good man. He died in a righteous cause. So this is David, a man after God's own heart. He did this. I mean, first he took another man's wife. He lied. And he murdered a man. He used his power and position to murder a man. So then Nathan, who is his prophet, he's like, there's priests and there's prophets. Nathan comes to him and tells him a story. He says, there was this traveling wealthy king traveling through the land, and he came upon a small farm, and they had one young lamb, and the king demanded that the lamb be slaughtered, that he and his entourage could eat it. And the owner of the lamb was like, this is my family's pet. This is not, no, you can't kill our lamb. And anyway, the traveling king or nobleman wins out, and the lamb is slaughtered, and the nobleman feasts on the lamb. And when the story is told to David, he is furious. He says, such a man deserves to die. He will pay 10 times for what he took. He will pay 10 times. And as soon as he said that, Nathan's the name of the prophet, Nathan says to David, you are the man. And like right now, David's eyes are open, and he sees what he's done. And he collapses. He's like, oh my Lord God, forgive me. He's repentant. He's like, I can't believe I did this. Like, he was so deluded by his own power and, lust and whatever. And so he sins and brings, after the period of mourning, because their culture has a time of mourning. I don't know what it is, 3 months or whatever it is. After the time of mourning, he sins and takes Bathsheba as his wife. Now, he's already got, 4 or 5 wives, which is another thing. God has said one wife. And all of the kings had more than one. There wasn't one king that stuck to one wife. They all had lots of wives, though God commanded one man, one woman. They didn't follow that command. David was no different than this culture. And so when the baby's born, Nathan had told David that the baby will not live. But when the baby is born, even though David has been told that the baby's going to die, he fasts and he prays for the baby, who's obviously ill. And it's like days. He doesn't eat anything. He puts on sackcloth, which is like really itchy, coarse, jute kind of cloth, like rope, made out of rope, and it's itchy and heavy. And he throws ashes on his head, which makes you feel dirty and itchy. And he pleads with God to save the life of the child, and the child dies. After the child dies, David gets up, bathes himself, and goes about his life. And his staff, the people that minister to his needs, they're amazed, like, what is this? You've fasted when the child was alive and then you stop when the child dies, it seems backwards. You should be praying for the child's soul. And David's like, as long as I knew the child was alive, there was hope that God would have mercy on me and allow the child to live. But the child has gone to be with God. So I mean, we draw a lot of our theology out of this story, a lot of it. I'm not going to go into all of it, but so then Bathsheba gets pregnant. He marries her. She gets pregnant again, and Solomon is born. Solomon is not his oldest son, and they lived in a culture that the oldest son was the one that received the double portion that would ascend to the throne for the whole culture. There's a word for it. I can't remember it right at the moment. That's where notes come in handy, because I have it written down, but I can't remember the word. When I'm talking like this, my mind doesn't always work as fast as the story, I guess. So Solomon ends up becoming king after him, and Solomon's considered the wisest man that ever lived. Anyway, that's a whole other story. The reason I tell that story is because even though David committed this atrocious sequence of sin, brutal, evil stuff, he was still, as is reported, 4,000 years, 3,000 years later, he was a man after God's own heart, right? And we know that he was saved. He went to heaven. He didn't know Jesus. I mean, he did, because he knew God, but he never experienced Jesus. So here's how it all fits together. If we live up to what we know, then that's what God judges us to. Now, did David live up to what he knew was right and wrong? No, he did not. But he had this heart that was repentant, because he knew that he did not live up, and he sought God's forgiveness. So some Aborigine in Papua New Guinea who's never heard of Jesus, but his tribe has a code of ethic, a code of conduct, a code of morality, and an understanding of what it is to live, which we all do. Again, Romans says, not just Romans, Genesis, we all know. We all know what is right and what is wrong. It's intrinsic within us. We can deafen it. We can knock it down, and, pound it into the ground and say, I don't believe that. I can sleep with whoever I want. I can kill Charlie Kirk. I can do whatever I want because it's me. It's back to that nihilistic way of thinking, existentialist way of thinking that Nietzsche has injected into our culture. Nietzsche's teachings we've embraced. I've talked about that before. Even that native, if he lives up to his understanding of what is good and what is righteous, he will. This is my view. The Bible doesn't say this explicitly, but this is my view. The nature of God is such that he is just, and he will save that man. But the way that he is saved is by the blood of Jesus, because that doesn't change. That's the truth. The truth is, it's through Jesus, right? A good man, or a man that appears to be good, who has not lived up to his own standard of what is right and wrong. And Romans talks about this. None of us do. We don't live up to our own understanding of what is right and what is wrong. Very few of us. But if you have this attitude within you that is, God, forgive me, I mean, you may not even have a God concept, but this repentant attitude, this attitude of remorse, this attitude, God judges all of that. I can't judge it. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what anybody thinks or does. Neither do you. That's the fact, that God judges us by what we know. And that judgment is that freedom, that salvation is made possible by the blood of Christ, by the sacrifice of Jesus. That's just the way that it is. That's the truth of the matter. That's objective truth. In that, I mean, I said something similar when we talked on the phone, not near as long, not as extensive, but in that we trust that God is just, and we have to accept that what he says is true, No one enters the kingdom of God except through Jesus, who is the door, who is the gate. He is the light. He is the way. So Tim Keller makes a statement. Maybe I didn't hear it. I re-listened to the podcast. I didn't hear him say that. It may have been something that you internalized when you listened to it. I didn't hear it. I only re-listened quickly to try and hear it. I actually sped it up to 1.5 times, so I might have just missed it. But that's the way it is. If this causes you to have more questions, then I invite you to extend them to me. You can ask me anything. You can call me anytime. You can. I'm here. I give you what I got. It's not everything. It's just an old man's musings and wisdom from my youth until now. Okay? I love you deeply and in reality. Peace, my brother and my friend.